Who would not want to be a travel writer? To traveling around the world, going to all these exotic places, getting to try all kinds of great new things, write about it, get paid for it. It sounds great. And a lot of it is great. I've done my share of travel writing, and I've really enjoyed a lot of it. But it can be a little bit challenging too. So let's take a look at some of the options that we have to be involved in travel writing. So what is it? Basically, it's writing about places, people, things in other places. A lot of stories involve how to travel, when to travel, advice on traveling. A lot of it is relaying your travel experiences so that other people can have a similar experience or maybe even avoid that experience. What it's not is writing about your family's vacation. It's not writing about what you like or didn't like about one of your trips that you took, or writing about destinations so you can go for free. You have to really want to not only travel to places, but convey a lot of really deep insider information. It's work. I mean, you don't just go on vacation and write about it. You actually have to work and make sure that you gather a lot of material, do a lot of interviews, take a lot of photos. All of those things are part of travel writing. And one of the hardest things is to come up with an original idea, because a lot of the places you're going to want to travel where you think there might be a story have been written about already. So how can you make that story something that hasn't been done? So these are some of the myths about travel writing. I've gotten these from travel writers, that travel writers make enough money to live on. So a lot of them are either working on some sort of guidebooks or they're working for a top travel magazine. But a lot of travel writers are not doing that. So it's something that you can definitely do on the side. I wrote stories for Hemispheres, which is United Airlines magazine, about eating in different locations. Napa Valley, which is where I'm from, so I had a lot of access there. And I've written quite a few stories about traveling to the Napa Valley, the road not taken at the Napa Valley, traveling in Napa Valley with kids, doing things like that, because that's an area that I have expertise in. A destination is a story. There's no shortage of people who will head off to Belize or Zimbabwe or wherever it might be and want to write about that story. But unless you are going to be the first person who has ever landed in this particular area, the chances are it's been written about before. So how can you write about it in a way that's interesting? Now, that doesn't mean that you can't write about going to the Grand Canyon or traveling to New York, but you have to think of a way that you can make it original, something that has not had this particular angle and hasn't been published like this before. It's a myth that readers want every detail on a personal experience. They really don't want this long tome. That's a journal, and most people don't want to read your own personal journal. So it's got to be punchy. It's got to be quick. It's got to get you into the story and keep you moving through the story. The same way, magazines are not devoted to long stories either. I mean, we all love to see, if we're interested in travel, we're going to look at National Geographic or things like that. And those stories are wonderful, incredible pictures. Gosh, they pay a ton. They're incredibly hard to get. So what we're looking at a lot of times are shorter surgical strikes of stories that are going to give us in a few hundred words an experience, and something that's pretty succinct, that's just going to allow a reader to get this feeling and experience it and then move on to the next feeling. Now, I'd love to tell you that you write a story, you get paid, and it gets published, but that's not actually true. A lot of publications pay on when it is published, and that can take months. I've had it take years, believe it or not. So, it comes long after your travels. You're going to have to pay for your travel up front. Most magazines don't pay for your travel expenses, and they'll only the very, very lucky ones get to have payment on acceptance, which means when you hand in the article and they're happy with it, you get paid. The rest of it is you're either writing to be paid on publication or paid on spec, which is that idea of the manuscript. So if you're going to be traveling to Ethiopia and you want to pitch a story and they say, hey, we'll take a look at it when you get back, then you're going to write it and hope that they buy it, but you're under no guarantee. And most of the time, your assignments will not have the expenses covered. Only the really major travel magazines will have the budget to do that. So you may get some paid for, but often you won't get any paid for. So why do you do it? I do it because it's really fun. It's a great way to share experiences that I've had. I kind of go on some trips with the idea of writing about them. So I'll look at some original ways to approach a trip to see if it's possible to get an article written about it that might offset the expenses that I've had. So it's a way to be curious and be more of a perceptive traveler, so you can get more involved in the areas where you do travel. What makes it good is that you have to be entertaining. You have to be descriptive. You got to be very anecdotal, dig deep into where you are, and be original. Give me something I haven't read before. So I go back to this again. I know you've heard it a dozen times, but be a good reader. Start reading travel stories, read travel books, read travel logs, read travel magazines, see what makes it a travel story that you want to get involved in. Notice if there's other niche magazines that do traveling. So, I'm always looking at a way to tackle it from a parenting standpoint, because I have a son that I travel with my husband. So is there something I can do about traveling with kids? Look for an angle like that. I've written stories on traveling with your dogs, because at the time I wrote them, I had two dogs. So you can look for ways to be original, but you have to understand the goal of the magazine. So I've given you actually a similar story about traveling, the kind of a Disney travel experience on these three magazines: Travel and Leisure, Budget Travel, and Family Travel. And I've given them to you on the iTunes U course, but I want you to see how different they are, even though the subject matter is similar. They were all tackled in different ways. So you're looking at the different audiences, and you're kind of looking at all the components that make up travel. Try to think of a way to take a bigger subject and make it small. So this idea, a lot of people may want to write about London in spring or Paris in spring. That's not an easy story to write. But maybe you could look at something like how tea time works in England, or taking your child for tea in England, or doing a romantic tea in England. Those may be ways that you can tailor a story. That's actually how I covered a story about going to New York. Is I was trying to think of some way to write about it, and what I ended up doing was I compared tea time at the plaza in New York with tea time at a hotel in San Francisco. So by narrowing it down to that idea of tea, I was able to make that story marketable. So pick your angle. Remember that Paris is not a story. That's the destination. You have to come up with what the story is within that framework. And who are you? Are you a woman traveling alone in China? Are you a culinary expert? What is it about your own originality that might bring originality to the article? Writing what you know makes you an expert. So, the more that you can bring your own personal expertise into a story, the greater the likelihood is that you might be able to find a market for that story. You're also going to have to learn to go beyond writing. So don't just think you're going to come back with an article and get that published. No one else is with you. So I don't have the luxury of, as a magazine editor, sending a photographer later, or a videographer, or whatever else I might want to augment the story. You have to take pictures. You have to shoot video. You have to do all the interviewing. Everything has to be done while you're on the scene. And get me lots of details. I need to see it. I need you to show me. Again, show, don't tell. And that's never more true than it is in these travel stories. Words like stunning or breathtaking, fantastic, I don't know what that means. It means something different to me than it does to you. So be able to paint a picture for me of what you've experienced. So if you're waiting in a long line, that doesn't make anything to me either. Show me how many people are there. How much time did it take to get through the line? Where did it stretch from and to? That's going to help me see this context. The lead, as it always is really key to these stories. Paint me a very clear picture. Give me some really interesting statistic. Here's a story that I found from International Living. It was a woman who I always swore I would never skydive, and so she wrote this story. This description here: after we fell 7,000 feet, my instructor casually pointed out his new house on the lakeshore below. I'd been hitched to Pete in a haze of terror, dangling from the plane at 12,000 feet, but the exhilaration of the jump and the breathtaking view made up for it. So that gives me a much clearer idea, as opposed to saying she was scared, or it was high, or it was breathtaking. Again, doesn't really convey for me what this paragraph does.